Hi, I'm Robert Wheeler, the author of this book, Climbing Higher, Answering Big Questions. This book is about the most important experience that you can have in life. Why you're here, what you're doing, why you're doing it. I've attempted to develop this in the book from scientific information without all of the details and complications that normally go with this view. And I think this is important to show that this is not just my opinion. It has reputable resources. So relax, enjoy this summary with an open mind. Climbing Higher is a book about surmounting obstacles of life, reaching out for explanations of the mysteries of existence. It has a twofold purpose. First of all, to publicize information that I am convinced will help the problems of the world, and there are a few. Secondly, though, it is my opportunity to share some of the interesting experiences I have had in kicking around in this world for 90 plus years. I've had a number of experiences, learned a lot, and it's my opportunity to share this. The book uses mountains to represent the obstacles of life. Not everybody climbs mountains, but everybody does have to pursue and climb over obstacles during their lifetime. So mountains can be metaphors representing these obstacles that we all experience. It represents our desire for adventure, to reach out into the unknown, to explain why we're here, to reach out for something more than just our normal daily activities. Why do we struggle for difficult tasks, doing odd things like climbing mountains, participating in strenuous sports activities? What is the meaning of all of this? What is its purpose? The theme of the book is that we all have an innate need to pursue this sort of thing, to pursue an explanation of our existence, to find a sense of meaning and purpose in our life. The book starts with a story of the first major mountain that I climbed. This takes us back about 60 years when I was a young soldier on duty in Korea. Another soldier and I went on R&R to Tokyo, Japan, and decided that we were going to climb Mount Fuji. When we got to the small hotel, the small village at the base of the mountain, we were told, no, nobody climbs Mount Fuji at this time of the year. It's dangerous. There's ice, possibly snow, cold temperatures. It's just not a good idea to try it. Well, we considered that and said, we are soldiers, airborne, ranger qualified. We have surmounted much more difficult tasks than this. So at our insistence, the proprietor of the hotel found a taxi driver who could speak some English and agreed to take us to a spot on the mountain from which we could start to climb. And he said that there was a small hotel there. When we got to that small hotel, it was really small. It was a 2-room shack. This is how it looked. The Central Hotel at Station 5 on Mount Fuji. It was still open, fortunately, and there was one caretaker there. This old lady, a mama-san. She couldn't really any less than 100 years old. Couldn't speak English either. But fortunately, our taxi driver negotiated with her, and it was agreed that we could sleep there, rest until about midnight. She would get us up, give us some hot tea, and we would start our climb to the summit of Mount Fuji. It seems that the traditional way for Japanese people to climb Mount Fuji is at nighttime, so as to arrive at the summit at daybreak, at sunrise, because if a person is at the summit at sunrise, they not only are the first person to see the sunrise in the Eastern Hemisphere, but also all of the bad spirits that have been following get cut off. So this is a Japanese tradition. It's called Gorika, to arrive at the summit of Mount Fuji at sunrise. So this we did. The first couple of hours of climbing was okay, but then we started getting winded, tired, difficult to move. I was aware of hypoxia. This is a condition where the body is not used to the lack of oxygen and it can't move very vigorously. It's difficult to keep up body temperature. And this brings on another condition called hypothermia. I was aware of that already. And for the first time in my life, I was scared. I knew about hypoxia and about hypothermia. It's a very convenient way to die. The body just goes to sleep. Well, to make a long story short, we struggled on. We got to the summit, and this is what it looked like. Mount Fuji is a volcano, was a volcano. Here I'm standing on the rim of the volcano, and in the background, you can see the crater. And this is all that was visible: rock, ice, and a little bit of snow. Well, this chapter winds up with the question, why do people do such silly things? We could well have died that night on Mount Fuji. Why do people reach out for such activity? Mountain climbing, hazardous sports activities. There is a lot of participation in things like this that are not really productive. They may even seem silly. However, we pursue them. Psychology has learned a lot about this. The most obvious reason that people do these things is for stimulation, arousal. It seems that we all have a comfortable level of arousal. If we don't have enough, we're uncomfortable with boredom. If we have too much, we're overloaded with stress. So we each have a certain threshold of excitation that we're comfortable with. We have our own reactivity, how fast we react to arousal. You're probably aware of the type A personality, which psychology made famous. These are the go-getters, people that have a high threshold for excitation and a low reactivity. So they're the dynamic leaders, CEOs, first responders, soldiers. These are the go-getters that are looking for activity. The type T personality, with a capital T, which stands for thrill-seeking. There are some people, once again, that have a high threshold and low reactivity, and they reach out for more thrill-seeking activities. Achievement need, another topic in psychology that is generated a lot of research. But the big question here is, why would soldiers that already have a lot of arousal, excitation, demands on their life, why would they reach out in their off time to create more arousal? There must be more in the way of a reason for this. The next mountain climbing story that I present in the book is a demonstration of another reason: goal seeking. For me, this climb was a number of years later. My youngest son was a naval aviator stationed at Alameda, California. And one day he called me up and said, "Dad, remember you used to encourage us to get out and explore nature. You said that it's important for us to climb the tallest hill or mountain in the area." Well, the tallest mountain in the United States, the contiguous United States, is right down the road from where I am now. Mount Whitman, at 14,000 feet. It is the tallest mountain in our country, in the contiguous United States. So come on out here and we'll climb it together, which I did. Well, the interesting thing about Mount Whitney, going up 14,000 feet, on getting to the top, the view was impressive. To the west was the rolling hills going to the Pacific Ocean. To the east was the lowest spot in the United States. While standing on the highest spot, in the background of this picture, you can see the lowest spot, Death Valley. Goal orientation. This is a second reason that people reach out and do difficult things: to set, to plan, and to meet goals. The famous psychologist Abraham Maslow organized a concept about needs, and he established two levels of needs. Our basic needs start with physical comfort, food, health, and we have to have a continuation of meeting those physical needs: security, then also belonging. It seems that we are social animals. There is no animal more dependent on the species, its fellow species, than a human. So we need interpersonal relationships. Self-esteem. We need to have a feeling that we can accomplish things that are important. Well, these are the basic needs that usually dominate our daily activity. But there also seems to be a higher level of needs, what is referred to as meta needs. Things like appreciating an inspiring concert, enjoying a sunset, enjoying music, harmony, melody, experiencing justice, equality, a sense of awe and emotional arousal. These gets into a rather fuzzy area though. It's difficult to explain these meta needs. Actualization is a term that's sometimes used. That's defined as reaching out for one's potential, doing something beyond daily activities, exploring the mystery and the unknown aspects of life. So this chapter leads to the question: could hazardous sports activities, climbing mountains, meet these higher level meta needs? The next story says yes. A colleague that I was doing research with down at St. Louis University was from Argentina, and he had told stories about Mount Aconcagua. This is the tallest mountain in the Western Hemisphere, tallest mountain outside of the Himalayas at close to 23,000 feet. Very sacred to the ancient Indians who held this particular mountain in great reverence. It was a sacred sentinel for their culture, their view of reality. It seems that they made sacrifices of other humans, particularly children, on that mountain back in ancient days. And there are stories that the spirits of those sacrificed humans still exist on that mountain and do mysterious things. So, to explore those mysteries, we climbed Mount Aconcagua. It was not easy. It took 2 days of difficult climbing just to get to the base camp at 14,000 feet. And then through a series of temporary camps, we went on up the rest of the mountain. This is a view of one of our temporary camps after a snowstorm. A snowstorm had hit and caused us to live in these tents for 2 days. This is the way it looked after the snowstorm moved out. This is the view from the temporary camp from which we made the summit climb. Well, when we got back to the base camp, we had an elevated feeling of emotion, a sense that we had explored some mysteries that demanded explanation. It seems that most people at some time during their life will have some kind of experience that is mysterious, that demands an explanation. And unfortunately, it's not easy to find the explanation. Science can't deal with it. It can't be experimented with. It can't be observed. So for explanations, assumptions, speculations become invoked, and that in turn brings on a sense of mystery, mysticism, and a tendency to accept beliefs that have already been established in our society. These beliefs and the mysticism invoke a supernatural realm because natural realm doesn't explain things. Assumptions, speculation take hold, developing a sense of reference. But explanations can provide through this particular method. Explanations of its meaning and its source. These assumptions or beliefs are what form our interpretation of reality. It's our interpretation of experiences, our perception of reality. We all recognize that these views that we come up with about what life is all about, what is reality, is quite limited. It varies from one person to other. What we see is different from one person to the other. So there's a tremendous variance in the interpretation. So the question is, are these diverse perceptions of reality all valid? Why are there so many different views? Are the different views equally valid? That takes us to the next story, which investigates that. Because the location in the world of the most mysterious interpretations of reality is in Tibet, over in the Far East. So I went with another group of people that were interested in exploring the mysterious view of reality that the Tibetan Buddhists had. Our plan was to go to Kathmandu, major city in Nepal, where there was a Chinese embassy. The plan was to get our visas there at the Chinese embassy that controlled Tibet, then go on up to the capital of Tibet, the city of Lhasa. But when we got to Kathmandu, some rift had occurred between the Nepalese government and the Chinese government, and the embassy was closed. Well, this gave us an opportunity to spend several days there in Kathmandu, exploring the Hindu view of reality. One of the things that was impressive about the Hindu view of reality was the importance of death. It seems that we, according to this view, come into this world in a certain situation. And our task is to live in that situation, to develop it, and hopefully move on to a better life in our next reincarnation. So the end of life is quite important. And this is a view of the crematorium on one of the major rivers that went through Kathmandu. Well, we did finally get to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. And in Lhasa, the most impressive view is the Potala. This is a view of the Potala beyond its famous entrance gate. At one time, the Potala was the largest building, the largest structure in the world. I think it was replaced by the Pentagon in World War II. When it was built, it became the largest structure in the world. But at one time, the Potala was a scene of the government of Tibet. The Dalai Lama lived there with all of his government officials. It was a theocracy, and he had complete control over the population. But when the Chinese took over, they stopped all of that. All of the monks, the Tibetan Buddhists, were expelled from the Potala. And today it is a vacant building. Mainly, some of it is used as a museum. It is promoted as a tourist attraction. The most impressive thing that I experienced in Tibet was a visit to the Samye Monastery. This is a view of the monastery from Mount Haipuri, a mountain right adjacent to the monastery. In the center, you can see what looks like a building, a central building. It was, I think, 5 stories high, called the Yutsi. And this building represents the center of the universe. Outside of the Yutsi, within the circular stone wall that you can see around the buildings, that is the universe that we experience in daily life. Outside of the wall is a part of the universe that is beyond our daily experiences. This is where the spirits and the demons compete with each other. Mount Haipuri is quite sacred to the Tibetans. And while the rest of my group went off for a visit to caves where the monks were living, I arranged with a special guide to climb Mount Haipuri. Because it was on Mount Haipuri back in the 8th century that a guru from India, a Buddhist, was invited to come into Tibet to do something about the bad spirits that were controlling the population. So it was on Mount Haipuri that Guru Rinpoche defeated the ancient Bon spirits and established Buddhism in Tibet. So it's very sacred to the Tibet Buddhists. On the summit of Mount Haipuri, I had an interesting experience because I had told the guide that it was my custom when I climbed to the top of the mountain to pick up a few rocks to keep as mementos. So when we got up there, the guide very painstakingly went over the area and picked out a few rocks. But before he could give them to me, a mysterious thing happened. All of a sudden, a Buddhist monk in chiffon robes appeared behind me. I thought we were the only ones on the mountain, and where he came from was a huge mystery. He reached out his hands to the guide, took the rocks, mumbled some sounds to the rocks, gave the rocks back to the guide, and the guide handed the rocks to me. And upon that, the monk disappeared. Once again, to me, a rather mysterious and mystical situation. Well, I hold these rocks very specially now. Another interesting experience in Tibet was participation in a sky burial. Like the Hindus, the Tibetan Buddhists place a great deal of emphasis on the termination of a person's life. Firewood is pretty precious in Tibet, so they don't like to use it for cremation. And they have developed this custom of a sky burial. To participate in sky burial, we had to climb halfway up Drigung Mountain at nighttime to a monastery. And at that point, we joined the burial party and climbed up the rest of the way to the top of the mountain. We got there after sunrise, daylight, and this was the view. The open field there to the right, there was sitting, milling around very nicely, a flock of vultures. In the center, you can see a darkened area, circular. These were rocks and surrounded by a circular low brick wall. In the distance, you can see some people. This was my group and also the burial party after we had arrived. Behind them, some low shacks. In the distance, you can see what looks like clotheslines with the wash hanging out to dry. These are prayer flags, another very important thing for the Tibetan Buddhists to place prayers written on pieces of cloth and hang them out on lines for implementation. Well, when the burial ceremony started, a monk in white robes proceeded to chop up the deceased person with a big machete, threw the pieces of the deceased body out onto the rocks. Some kind of a signal was given to the vultures. They swarmed over the rocks, ate the flesh off of the bones, and then once again, in a very organized way, went back to settle down in the field. Then the monk picked up the bones that the vultures had left, proceeded to smash the bones up with a mallet, sprinkle barley on them, and throw the bones back in the rocks, give a signal to the vultures that swarmed in on the rocks, and proceeded to eat up the bones. It seems that vultures will eat human bones when they have been splintered and had barley powder sprinkled on them. Well, after that, we were invited to join the burial party for breakfast. We all agreed, though, that we weren't very hungry, and we proceeded to climb down off the mountain and go back to our base camp. So this is an example of a mystical view of reality that seemed to be based on particular culture. Views of reality, how are they formed? Well, once again, there is a lot of research about this. And one category of reality views, which I call personal reality, takes us into the topic about consciousness. Consciousness is defined as our awareness of our surroundings and of ourselves and what we're doing within those surroundings. This is what creates our perception and personal view of reality. The explanations depends on many things. To what extent we even think about it, our level of thinking, our assumptions, our education, particularly our early childhood experiences, the beliefs in the society, the people around us. There are many theories that have been developed. I have categorized them here into three groups. The best known is materialism. This is a view of consciousness and our human perceptions that say it is all based on neurological processes of the brain. No brain, no consciousness. That's the extent of it. It's what we physically experience in the world around us. However, there is another group of theories that are centered around what's called dualism, that there is a separate aspect, not just the epiphenomena of neurological processes in the brain, but that there is a mind that is different from that, a mental activity. So this is a category of dualism. And then the third category, referred to generally as idealism, goes a bit further. And it says there are aspects of the human mind that can project itself away from the brain, away from the neurological processes. And then we have the spirit, the soul, an aspect of the mind that can even exist after physical death. Well, this gets into an unknown area. It is mysterious. It cannot be explained in science. Science supports materialism and has capitalized on the materialistic approach to produce advances that give us the tremendous comforts that we enjoy today. But unfortunately, this scientific approach, with all of its advances, cannot provide an explanation for the mysterious feelings that we have that demand explanation, feelings of awe, explanations of how the mind works, and how psychic phenomena that have been supported can occur. On the other hand, religion and philosophy does provide for this quite well. Religion and philosophy can fill in with the idealistic beliefs that branch us out beyond the supernatural, because we have to get away from natural, brings in deities, God. And this provides for explanations that science cannot provide. The unfortunate thing is that some of these explanations that come from religions don't fit in with our daily modern experiences, what happens to us on a daily basis, and not consistent with the ideas that had developed by our ancient ancestors who lived under entirely different conditions. Well, the conflicts that have come from death, our modern experiences, and research findings has caused the influence, the benefits of religion to drop off considerably. We have lost a lot of the benefits that certainty and explanation from religion. So, in any case, our view of reality can be material, it could be dualistic, it could be idealistic, or it could be a combination of all of them. The question is this just a product of personal opinion, subjective experience? Why are there so many different views? Is there a universal view, a cosmic or ultimate view of reality behind all of these personal views? Well, our society that we exist in, many societies say yes. And that's demonstrated in the next mountain climbing story that the book presents. It seems there's a large segment of American population, the Native Americans, that think that yes, there is a universal view of reality. To investigate this, I went with a group to climb Blanca Mountain in Colorado. Blanca Mountain is the eastern pillar of the Navajo Nation of Native Americans, very sacred. And it seems that their view of reality provides for a person's spirit at the end of their life to go up to heaven through this mountain. And they have other mountains through which a person's soul can progress into heaven. Our plan was, when we got to the top of the peak, Blanca Peak, to have a short meditation and see if we could get any feeling of any of these spirits that might have come up over the mountain. So when we got up there, we did settle into a meditation, but had just got into it when all of a sudden, each of us individually were jolted away from our meditation with a very urgent feeling to get off of the mountain. Well, this was somewhat mysterious because the sky was still not threatening. However, the feeling that we had was so strong that we did start down. And through our descent back to the base camp, all of a sudden, when we got there, a tremendous thunderstorm came up. Bolts of lightning were striking the top of the mountain. So it is possible that there was one of those ancient spirits that was warning us to get off of the mountain, because that was no place to be when the lightning bolts started striking. So this takes us to what is called ultimate reality, a universal reality beyond our just individual personal opinion. Belief in a universal reality has always existed. Our ancient ancestors thought about this sort of thing a lot, and they formulated explanations. These explanations formed religions, and it's these religions that still dominate our society today. It doesn't make any difference whether you believe in any particular religion or not. Those religions do dominate society, and you're influenced by it. Well, an explanation of this is what's called the ontological imperative, an innate need that we seem to have to develop an explanation for the causes of these deep events. This is best captured in the term spirituality. And it seems that we all have an innate need, an imperative to have some type of provision for this existence beyond our everyday experiences. Spirituality. And when spirituality concepts are well enough formed that they can be shared with other people, they become beliefs. They establish religions. Religions then acquire structure, dogma, and constraints. And it's this dogma and constraints that has caused a deterioration in the influence of the benefits of religion. Religion has provided many certainty concepts, explanation of the unknown, as well as other benefits, social support, sense of belonging, and so forth. So religion has been very helpful, but it has become illogical, that doesn't fit in logically with our modern experiences. And also, it conflicts many times with modern research findings. So, this is a problem in society today. And despite some attempts that have been made to modify, make corrections in religious beliefs, the question still arises: is there a universal view of reality that can be justified? The next mountain climbing story in the book takes us to Mount Moriah in Israel. Mount Moriah is sacred to all three of the major religions of the world. The major religions of the world, and I say these are the major religions. There are sometimes considered other religions from the Far East, Buddhism, Hinduism. However, those are mainly philosophies and ideology. So I think it's safe in saying that the major religions of the world have a common base in Mount Moriah and are based on a common view of reality. Here in the center of this view of Mount Moriah, you see the famous Dome of the Rock, the Golden Dome, very sacred to the Islam, the Muslim people, and they have control of the Dome of the Rock at the present time by agreement. This is a view from the other side, from the west of Mount Moriah, showing the Wailing Wall, very sacred to the Jewish people. And then just off Mount Moriah is the Holy Sepulchre, very sacred to the Christian people. The interesting thing about the Holy Sepulchre is that it has been the scene of horrible conflicts, warfare, fighting. And this in turn raises a big question about these three religions with a universal concept of reality. Is it really valid? It is possible that a universal view of reality cannot be justified. And the horrors that have existed in the Middle East with their conflicts back through the ages came to a head after World War II. The horrors of World War II caused people to think, how can these horrible things happen? And out of all of this consideration of these horrible things that are happening, existential philosophy, existential psychology, and the existential view of reality developed. What it says is that we have to take responsibility ourselves as human beings for our situation. We can't just rely on a nebulous, transcendent deity. We have to live in the world as it is now and handle things ourselves without transcendent help. Religions have been very helpful in the past. They have provided explanation and certainty, but now, with our modern experiences, much of what the religions provide are illogical. They don't make sense. And as I said before, they conflict with the results of research findings. Well, religion has provided explanation, provided uncertainty in the past, even though it is illogical now. Where science is now logical, very productive, but it is incomplete. It cannot answer these ultimate questions. So, which is better? The illogical certainty of religion or the logical uncertainty of science. This creates a dilemma and a paradox because it seems that our current research supports the fact we need both. We need belief in something with faith that we are comfortable with and have a certain sense of certainty. Yet we also need to have a doubt in the validity of this belief and its faith, which entails uncertainty. So can we exist comfortably with this dilemma and this paradox if we dig down deeply enough in our thinking to try to resolve the problems of loss of benefit of religion? I had spent several years in Japan and was impressed with the Japanese people not seeming to be involved with this paradox, dilemma, and conflict between modern experiences and beliefs. And I often thought climbing Mount Fuji with the Japanese people at the present time might give an indication if this paradox and dilemma can be resolved. So one of my sons and I joined a group of Japanese people in a traditional climb of Mount Fuji. When we started our climb and got to Station 5, this is what we saw. If you remember, back 60 years ago, this was a view of Station 5, a two-room shack that was considered a hotel. Now, there were 5 hotels. The approach to Station 5, instead of being a gravel road, was a paved highway, a large paved parking area and assembly areas, and a whole bunch of happy, joyous pilgrims getting ready to climb Mount Fuji. Here is the joyous group of pilgrims that we joined for a traditional climb up Mount Fuji. And at the beginning, it was a joyous occasion. No concern about conflicts between beliefs, no concern about a paradox. As we climbed higher, though, it became a little bit more difficult, and some of the joyousness of the pilgrims sort of dissipated. When we got to the summit, this is what we found. A big modern hotel, restaurant, a comfortable, warm lounge area. Now, if you remember, 60 years ago, this is what the summit of Mount Fuji looked like. Well, it was entirely different now. We did experience Gorika for the sunrise. And during the descent off of the mountain, I had the opportunity to talk to some of the pilgrims, and at other times I had talked with the Japanese people and found that, yes, they did feel conflicts, particularly coming down off the mountain. It wasn't quite as joyous as it was when they started out. So this gives support for another view of reality, what I refer to as pragmatic reality, because it seems that there is a great amount of difficulty resolving the conflict and the dilemma, the paradox, but it can possibly be acceptable if we recognize, first of all, that ontological imperative, a need that we seem to all have built into us to explain our existence. And we recognize that our view is limited. Astronomers looking out in space The further they can look, the more they see. Physicists looking into the atom, the further they can look, the more they see. Indications now are that our universe may go on forever. We may live in multiple universes, a pluralistic environment. But our knowledge is limited. We just don't know. We have to recognize that. And unfortunately, there is a certain amount of uncertainty that we have to accept. And another thing is we have to recognize that there may be different views of reality. And while being secure in our own view, we have to be tolerant of other people's views. This I call ecumenical humanism. And that all leads to a philosophy of pragmatic pluralism, recognizing that anything is possible, but not everything is probable. And we have to live in the environment as it presents itself to us here and now. And that's pragmatism. We have to accept uncertainty as being natural. Can we live with this? Well, that is the last major mountain climbing story that Climbing Higher has in it. A question: can an 85-year-old man with worn out muscles, deteriorated joints, could an 85-year-old man get to the top of a mountain like Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa? It is uncertain. Well, I tried. At 85 years of age, the first part of the climb was quite enjoyable, going through a rainforest and getting up above the tree line. This is the first view that I had of the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. Well, from there, it was a difficult climb. It took 3 days to get from there on up to a base camp at 15,000 feet. And then from the base camp, it was a night climb to get up to the summit. It seems that, like with Mount Fuji, the traditional way of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro is during the night so as to arrive at the summit after sunrise. That was difficult. Well, once again, to make a long story short, I made it, an 85-year-old man. Kilimanjaro is a volcano, the same way as Mount Fuji. Here we are on the rim of the volcano, and it was just a short distance from when we got to the rim to the summit. And this is a view at the summit. We had not only survived the uncertainty of getting an 85-year-old man to a very difficult climb, that uncertainty was rewarded because a new record was set for the Guinness World Book Records of the oldest man to get to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. So, yes, we can live with uncertainty. We can live with paradox if we can recognize that this is a natural part of life. We have to pursue explanations, and we have to modify our religions so that they will make sense and provide for this. To do that, we have to broaden our vision. We have to increase our knowledge. We have to think more deeply about things than we are at the present time. We may even have to think about these ultimate concerns as much as our ancient ancestors thought about them. We have to manage our tolerance of other people's beliefs, of alternate views. We have to use uncertainty to our own advantage because it does provide energy for our daily accomplishments. We have to accept plurality, the possibilities of anything happening, but the probability of what's going to happen here and now in the environment in which we exist. We have to justify both belief and doubt. This completes the theme of the book. I do add one more mountain climbing story in an epilogue. This took place in Taiwan when I was advisor to Chiang Kai-shek's army for aircraft maintenance matters. And we had a small flight detachment. And one of our pilots smashed this airplane into the side of the mountain. And it was my task to lead a mountain climbing party up the mountain to evacuate his remains. This gave me an opportunity to make a few comments about lifespan development. How does a person view their life when they get at the advanced stage? And psychology has a lot to say about this. How we can arrive at advanced stages of life with a feeling of integrity, of satisfaction, as opposed to a feeling of despair and dissatisfaction with what we have done. To have this, we have the feeling that we have strived for additional knowledge, for understanding, that we have attempted to pursue an explanation, pursue growth, not only of ourselves, but of other people, been helpful to other people, to our community, to our society, to civilization. And if you want to really be idealistic, to the advancement of our species. With this, we can see life as having meaning, purpose, and manageability. So what does it all mean? What is the importance of climbing higher? What are the implications? The first thing is, for a meaningful, purposeful, manageable life, we need to have some provision for an explanation. We need to have an emphasis on the pursuit of these big questions, thinking a little bit more deeply about what's going on. And to have that, we need the cooperation of our media, TV, magazines, newspapers. There needs to be a shift in the emphasis provided by our politicians, our leaders, our educators. If we can achieve this, I am convinced that it will alleviate most of the problems of the world. For individuals, it'll reduce the increasing incidence of anxiety, depression, sense of dissatisfaction, stress. For societies, it'll reduce crime, murder, violence, chaos, which is increasing. And globally, for nations, it would reduce warfare, aggression, conflict, and terrorism. Well, I thank you for sharing this, for listening to this presentation. If you're interested in more information, visit this website, OntosScience.com. Once again, thanks for listening.